Okay, so memorizing unit circle is actually very, very easy. All you have to do is actually just know the pattern for this quadrant. And if you know the pattern for just the x coordinates, then you also know the pattern for the y coordinates. And because it's a circle, if you know this quadrant, then you also know this quadrant because it's just mirrored. For example, since this is in the positive x space and the positive y space, then you know that all x coordinates have to be positive. You know that all y coordinates also have to be positive. Likewise, this now on this side over here is in the negative x space, but in the positive y space. Therefore, you know that all x coordinates have to be negative and all y coordinates have to be positive. But since they're the same, all you're doing is changing their value. So you don't even need to look at a unit circle to understand this fundamentally. What I'm going to do is draw the x and y axes, because that's all the unit circle is. It's just the x and y axes with a circle around it. So y, x, and as we know, this is 90 degrees, this is 180 degrees, this is 0 and 360, and this is 270, because it just increases in terms of 90 degrees, like that. Therefore, in the middle would have to be, well, between 90 and 0, so that's 45 degrees. And there's a third one, which is between 45 and 0. This is 30. So this increases by 30 degrees. This increases by 15. And then this one is 60, because this one also increases by 15 and increases by 30 here. So, as you know, these are the degrees. Maybe I'll just go ahead and write them real fast. This is the one thing you probably do have to memorize. Everything else isn't really a memory kind of thing. Okay. So as you know, every single one of these pertains to an x value and a y value. These are vectors. So these have components, and the components are actually super easy to memorize. One sec. Okay. So as we know, this is the origin, and the origin has coordinates 0, 0, right? Well, if you just go straight up, your x coordinate is still 0 because you haven't moved horizontally at all. But your y coordinate has changed because you have moved vertically. So this right here is actually 0, 1. The maximum height for the unit circle in any direction is 1, and then if it's in the negative, negative 1. So using that, we can now actually go ahead and fill out the coordinates over here. Since this is just moving directly horizontally in the horizontal, but not moving vertically at all, then we know that our x coordinate is 1. And because we haven't moved vertically, the y coordinate is 0. Likewise, this is negative 1 and 0 because this is just the other side of that. And then since this is just the other side of this, this has a coordinate of 0, negative 1. Cool. Well, the fun thing is that this actually just increases as you go down, as far as the x-coordinate is concerned. So let's start filling out the x-coordinates only. This goes to 1/2. You notice how we go from 0 to to 1 here in the numerator. Then this becomes 2, so look how we went from 1 to 2, but it is a square root of 2. And this goes to 3, well, the square root of 3. And then from 3, we end up going back down to 1. However, that doesn't really matter. You don't have to memorize this jump to this one because just applying the general knowledge of how axes work, you would already know this is 1, and that you would already know that this is 0. So now, what about the y coordinates? Well, instead of looking at this one, we can look at this one. Or I mean, we could still look at this one actually. So this one, instead of increasing, now we're just decreasing. So this one is a square root of 3 over 2. This is same thing. We're going from 1 to the square root of 3 over 2. Same we went from square root of 3 over 2 to 1 here. So now we're going to go down. Square root of 3 over 2. Well, now we have square root of 2 over 2. We went from 3 to 2. Here we have 1/2. We went from square root of 2 to 1. And if you kind of see, they actually mirror each other. For example, we have 1 over 2 here, and over here we have 1 over 2. You notice that paired with this coordinate for 1 over 2 is the square root of 3 over 2. Well, over here, we have 1 over 2, and then we also have the square root of 3 over 2. And then this one they're just the same. For 45 degrees, they're just the same. And then so you might be thinking, well, how does this help me with this other side? Well, they're all the same. It's just mirrored. If I were to draw these 3 lines, like how we have on a unit circle, 1, 2, 3, then I know, just by looking at this, what they are. This one right here is negative 1/2 square root of 3 over 2. How do I get that? Well, it's the same thing as this one over here, but the x coordinate is just negative because we're in the negative side of the x-axis. We're still in the positive y space, so none of the y-axes are changing. So this is still going to be square root of 3 over 2. Likewise, this one over here would be square root of 2 over 2, negative. And then this would be square root of 2 over 2. How do I get that? Well, over here, for the middle line, it's the square root of 2 over 2, comma, square root of 2 over 2. Well, this one is also square root of 2 over 2, square root of 2 over 2. The only difference is that the square root of 2 over 2 for the x is negative because, again, we're in the negative x space. Likewise, this one is negative square root of 3 over 2, 1/2. Because, again, we are still in the positive y space. You know, we're above, not below. However, we are in the negative x space because we're on this side to the left. So now we already have half the unit circle done. So what about these bottom axes, right? Let's just start erasing some stuff so it's a little bit easier to look at. Okay, so let's draw some more lines. So something to note is that for the same reason I knew that this would have a negative x in this range over here, but a positive y, this is in the negative x space because we're to the left, but it's also in the negative y space because we're now below the x-axis. So based on that, we know that all coordinates in this range have to have negative x and negative y values. Well, right here we had negative square root of 3 over 2. Well, over here we also have negative square root of 3 over 2. But this time we have negative 1/2 because we're in the negative y space. We're below the x-axis. And then so if we have negative square root of 3 over 2 here, well then following that trend I showed you in the beginning when we were doing this, this side, we're going to go down. So now we have negative square root of 2 over 2 and negative square root of 2 over 2. Likewise for here, we're going to go down again. So now we're at negative 1/2 and negative square root of 3 over 2. Let's double check with the unit circle to see if this is right. Remember, negative square root of 3 over 2, negative square root of 2 over 2, negative 1/2. And that's the for the x coordinates. All right, here, negative square root of 3 over 2, negative square root of 2, negative 1/2. So now let's go ahead and do this quadrant. Draw my 3 lines. Just like in the unit circle. Okay. This is going to be negative 1/2. This is actually going to be positive 1/2. In this one, we are in the positive x space, but we are in the negative y space because we are below the x-axis. So because of that, we know that our x coordinates will all be positive. However, our y coordinates will be negative. So for this one, we have 1/2, but we have negative square root of 3 over 2. For this one, we have square root of 2 over 2, but negative square root of 2 over 2. You also always notice that the middle one, see how there's 3 lines here? Well, the middle one, this one, this one, this one, and this one, all have coordinates square root of 2 over 2. It just depends whether the x or the y is negative based on which quadrant you're in. Because again, if we're below the x-axis here, then we have negative y values. And if we're to the right side of the x-axis, then we have positive x values. And if we're to the left side of the x-axis, then we have negative x values. Just an important thing to notice. So again, if I have square root of 2 over 2 here, then I have 1/2 here, and I have negative square root of 3 over 2 here. And now we have filled out the entire unit circle. But this all came fundamentally from the understanding that this quadrant looks like this. And that's how you memorize the unit circle.